I first of all just want to say thank you to Zuzi and Pavel. You don't know how rare this is to get a sellout conference in today's economy. And not only that, just the acclaimed international speakers that they brought. So if you guys could give them just an additional hand, I think every conference is struggling right now with getting, a lot of budgets are getting cut, and these are the things that are getting cut. The second thing I want to share maybe before I go into my talk, I've been having some more reflections on my role as a trainer and coach. And I'm curious here, how many of you feel like part of your role to some degree is a trainer or coach? Just show of hands. Look around the room. Of those that didn't raise your hands, how many of you, two hands, I love it. How many of you that didn't raise your hand, maybe you see that as a path for you coming as you grow? Okay, a few of you. Some of you are like, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah, certainly a lot of us get attracted, I think, to conferences like this, and thank you for being here. I've been reflecting on this because I think I got it wrong. I've been doing this for about 20 years as a trainer and coach, and I was a leader for about 10 years before that, so I'm aging myself. But I feel like my approach to it has been incorrect. And what I mean by that is I felt like my role was to teach. I felt like my role was to help develop, but I realized that that's not my job. In fact, I can't even do that anymore. The only one responsible for the development is the person. They have to take on the ownership of learning and growth. All I can do as a trainer and a coach is to inspire that journey, is to maybe walk with them on that journey, is to help support them when it becomes challenging on that journey. And I think as a trainer and a coach, or if you're looking for that role, I would hesitate getting into that role because you want to teach somebody or because you want to preach something. I don't think that works. In fact, I think people get turned off when we go into teacher-preacher mode. I found that really the more effective role is an inspirational role, is a role that helps people move into a direction, maybe open a new door. And that's really what I want to share with you today, is a little bit about what that can do when a leader or a leadership team or anybody can really take that step. Now, my name's Pete Behrens, founder of the Agile Leadership Journey, CEO of the Agile Leadership Journey. And what that really means, what we are, we're not a consultancy. We're not here to, run a bunch of classes. What we are is really a curriculum of and trainers and coaches around the world who are trying to inspire, educate, and catalyze leaders to take their own journey. I've been a trainer and coach. I've been in organizations for so long, and I found, I can only do so much. It's up to the leaders, it's up to the organization itself to drive that journey. And that's what we're here to do to support. But I want to start with a story taking me back a little bit. My first job out of university was with a company who was taking mainframe systems and trying to bring them into new technology, right? This is pre-Y2K. And yeah, Y2K was a problem. And I was put on a consulting job where we had to, do all this stuff. And for 2 years, right, as an engineer, I was completely frustrated. Because what did we do? We analyzed their systems. We designed systems. We created a lot of documents. And binders and binders of books. This is a lot of the internet technologies. And yet for 2 years, we didn't deliver a single piece of value, right? There wasn't one change to a system in 2 years with dozens of people. Incredibly frustrating. Now, I wasn't the only one frustrated, but for some reason, and I can't even really explain it, myself and 2 others somehow were able to convince our management team to try something different. This was the early 90s. We called it RAD, Rapid Application Development. Pre-Agile kind of techniques. Alex over here is like, yeah, I've been there doing that. You'll hear from him shortly. I don't know how we did it, but we got 3 of us to get some budget. I call it my first startup. It's the best kind of startup you can get. You don't leave your job and you still get to start something new. We went into my friend's basement. I call him my friend because we're colleagues, but we were buddies. And we went into his basement for 3 months. We worked in his basement, 3 of us, for 3 months and came out with a prototype and brought it into the organization. And that team of 3, over the next course of 3 years, turned into 30, turned into 300, delivering value. My point here is any team that has courage to try something different, openness to explore that, and the commitment and focus to repeat and repeat and repeat can make a difference. And that's the story I want to share with you, but I want to multiply that by 2. The story I'm going to share with you today is a 600-member organization where the leadership team had the courage, had the openness, had the focus, the commitment, and the respect to drive change in their organization. Does anybody know where these 5 words come from? Look at that. Most of you know this. That's awesome. Good for you. A lot of times you're like, what's that? Yeah, these are the values in the Scrum Alliance version of Scrum. Now, there's so many Scrum variants out there. Who knows whether they're part of your version of Scrum? But this is, I have found, I've been a Scrum trainer and coach. I'm called an emeritus now because I don't do it anymore. I was a Scrum trainer and coach for 10 years. And I've come to find the values actually more valuable than the practices. Let me share that with you here a little bit. I'm going to share a story of Amerisure. This is an American-based insurance company. It's a real company, founded in 1912, so this is a very old company, right? Not too different than many companies around here, focused in industrial or commercial insurance, right? And this is a 4-year journey. So what I'm going to be sharing you has a lot of parts, but I'm boiling it down to some very simple pieces of this story. The other thing I want to share with this, it's not a success story. Yes, they had success. They have success. But I'm not trying to pitch this as perfect. This is not perfect. What I'm trying to pitch this as is when you focus on something, you can make a difference. That's what I'm trying to share with you today. So let's start with courage. Now, we've all experienced when our backs are against the wall. COVID. We've seen what can happen when we have no choice, right? Change is actually relatively easy when there is no choice. We've all seen it. I experienced this. I said I would never teach our public classes or our private classes remotely. Yep, foot in mouth. I did it many times. And it can be effective to a certain degree, right? Adults can learn online. Amerisure, on the other hand, though, did not have their backs against the wall. They did not have that immediate pressure that said, you must change or you're going to die. Yet, they were still able to take a courageous leap and to try something new. I find this to be one of the most fascinating steps. When I think of agility, I think of courage. Why? Because we have to make decisions without having all of the information. Let me say that again. When I teach leadership, I say agility is making decisions when you don't have all of the information. That takes a bold step. Amerisure was able to take a bold step because, yes, they saw some writing on the wall of where the technology was heading, and they knew they needed to create a little bit more innovative culture. Now, the next thing I usually see happen is we delegate change. We offer it up to, we hire the consulting companies to come in and say, hey, help us do this, or do it for us, right? That's easier. Number one, it's somebody to blame if it goes wrong. But it also just offloads a lot of the work. It's not easy. So I see a lot of leadership teams say, okay, yeah, that's good, let's go do it. Amerisure, on the other hand, said, no, if this is a path we're going to take, we've got to own this. And this is one of the principles of Agile leadership journey. If the leaders aren't on that journey, it won't happen. Our philosophy is that the only way an organization starts to change is the leaders start to change. And so what we talk about with leaders is if this is an important step for you, if this is a bold step you want to take, you've got to take that step. Now, again, it's easier to take small steps. In fact, we teach this a lot. I think when Scrum first came out, what they said was, try it. Set up a pilot. Ken Schwaber even wrote about this in his very first paper on Scrum, right? The adoption paper of Scrum. If you've been around long enough, you know that, right? You start with a pilot, you test it out, you expand it to a few more teams, and you go on. I find the companies that are most effective, companies like Salesforce, right? Companies like Amerisure take bold steps. They say, if this is a step we want to take, let's all buy in. A lot of companies ask me, Pete, we want to know, when do we flip the Agile switch? We have our traditional projects and we have our Agile projects. When should we flip the switch? I said, to be honest, if you have a switch flip, you're never going to transform into a different organization. You're just going to extend the churn. I find companies that go all in, I call this a dial. I'd rather have a dial of agility. Like, let's ramp up agility, ramp down agility, but it's not a switch. Right? Everything we do has to have some form of agility, and so they were willing to take that step. And finally, it's easier in today's world to use prepackaged contents. How many here are using some scaling frameworks or other kinds of Agile frameworks and tools and things like that? Most of you, I would imagine. Or you're trying to, or partial, or all these kind of variants, right? You're doubling, raise your hands, I love it. I call these recipes. It's easier to follow a recipe, right? It's easier to follow a recipe, but to be honest, we're never going to become a 5-star restaurant if we're following recipes. Go to any chef out there, any 5-star restaurant out there, Michelin restaurant. They don't follow recipes, they make recipes. And I find the best organizations who drive Agile adoption and are effective using Agile ways of working make their own recipes. Means they do it their own way. Yes, we can start with some of the recipes, but if we're following recipes all along the way, we're never going to adopt into a more effective organization. All right. Step 1, the boldness it takes to take that first step. I find this probably the most challenging because it's the easiest to offload. But I think the hardest one to actually do is the openness, that we need to be aware that there is something new. Now, what's interesting, I find in organizations, it's not just about Agile, it's about leadership itself. No company in the world hires an employee without education and experience. My guess is you got your job because of your education, because of your experience. Yet every day we promote these very same people into leadership roles without education or experience. Anybody experience this? Yes. Why do we do this? Why do we put people in charge of organizations who have no education and experience? It's just incredibly stupid. Most people leave their job because of their manager. We have a lot of bad managers out there. Not because they're maniacally bad, they're just not educated and experienced to do the job right. Now, the sad news, we're not alone. Only about 33%, according to the Blanchard report, receive formal education in leadership. That's a sad state, 1/3. Receive the right education, mentoring, coaching to do their job. And usually when they get the training, what is it? Performance reviews, communication 101, right? Powerful questions, things like, sorry if you teach powerful questions, sorry, those are good. PowerPoint. Yes. We're not teaching them the right skills. And more importantly, what we hear over and over with business transformation, leadership development is not critical to it. Oh yeah, we don't need to change our leadership to go through a transformation. Yet what we find, the Agile leadership journey I mentioned, we believe that the only way to get organizational transformation is through leadership transformations. In fact, as a human system, organizations mirror their leadership. This is what we call our leadership compass. The leadership compass guides leaders. It says this bottom right quadrant is what everybody wants. I would say 90% of the Agile space focuses on the bottom right quadrant. Improve value delivery, speed it up, better quality, better focus on our customers, etc. Right? Yet every other 3 quadrants are the ones that shape that. Agile Leadership Journey doesn't teach any form of Agile as you know it. In fact, that's the number one thing we hear from leaders who join our classes. I thought this was a class about Agile methods and practices and processes. It's like, this actually blew my mind because you didn't tell me anything about Scrum or Kanban or SAFe. What we focus on is we focus on leaders. We develop leaders to shape the organization. We find if you want the bottom, what you need to do is you need to shape the top. So what we focus on is we focus on leaders. We say, leaders, if you could change the way you think, and then the way you act or the way you behave, the way you focus, that's going to start to shape culture. And that's going to start to change the value stream delivery. So what we do with leadership teams, in fact, this was one from about 4 years ago, but I was just last week at a large chemical industrial plant. We had about the same. We had about 30-some leaders in a room just like this. And what was fascinating is when you get these leaders in the room and they start to learn about themselves and the way they show up and how they are impacting the culture, right? This starts to open some doors. This starts to inspire them to some degree to take a different path. This was the AmeriShare leadership team going through the journey themselves. They're in a class learning not about Scrum and Kanban, but learning about the things that shape. So what we don't teach, not to say it's not important, but we're not teaching, because leaders, they can go to a SAFe class. They can go to a Scrum class. That's okay. What we find, though, is leaders need to understand the levers that shape the culture. These are things like the mindset. These are things like the policies, governance, risk. Those are the things that shape all of the things you guys have to deal with. It was interesting. I was just with the leadership team last week. We have senior leaders. Senior leaders tend to they have a lot of pressures and a lot of needs. Like, we have to do all these things. And then you have the organization. And the organization delivers or tries to deliver all these things. I call this the games we play. We have a leader game and we have a team game. And they typically play different games. The team I had last week was what I call the brokers. They broker between the leadership team and the delivery team. And we did a survey with them, and we asked them about how they felt about the culture. And then we asked the senior leaders how they felt about the culture and the teams below them. What was interesting is these brokers in the middle felt the most pain. And then they wondered, why did we get them in the room? And they said, we can't change this. We said, you're the only ones to change this. You're the only ones who see it. The power of when you get leaders in a room and start to understand their role in shaping change in an organization is pretty incredible. This leads me to what Agile leadership is not. There's a lot of myths of what I think we talk about, what we think about is Agile leadership. Agile leadership is not teaching people about Agile. It's not being the expert in Agile. It's not being the Scrum Master. Agile leadership is also not the person who drives the Agile transformation. That is not Agile leadership. That's leading Agile. And in fact, Agile leadership is not servant leadership. It's a very big difference between Agile leadership, an adaptive form of self-awareness and reflection and adaptation, than servant leadership. What Agile leadership is, on the other hand, and this is one of the things I find fascinating. I was just asking Zuzi this morning her definition. She wrote a book called The Agile Leader. You should check it out, right? Agile leadership is a personal journey. It's a personal improvement where you start to grow not only your own mindset, but you start to get new awareness so you can make better decisions in real time. I love the word creativity. Creativity and agility are actually the same thing. Creativity is an adaptive mind. Agility is the adaptive action. We find the adaptive mind to be more powerful than the adaptive action. Why? If all we have is Agile as a movement, we have a dog chasing squirrels. Squirrel, 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 right? You probably see a lot of that in your organizations. Agile means we move quickly, and it's just chaos. But Agile as a thought process, I can see more, I have more choices in front of me, and I actually situationally adapt more easily, means I'm making better decisions in real time. That's what we're teaching leaders. And it's not about growth in this way, saying, I'm just a catalyst. You're seeing the nested doll signal here, because what we're saying is catalyst leaders are more adaptive because they actually embody all three parts, all three roles. We're more adaptive because we can actually integrate some of the things we do. And this is especially true when we're talking about complex environments. So while teaching frameworks, recipes, scaling methods is okay, what we want to do is really focus on mindset and culture, and that's where we start to see a difference. Okay, so we got the courage to take a bold step. We got the openness to say, well, maybe there's a different way to go about this. But then we need some focus. I keep saying this is the hardest step. Focus is the hardest step. Why? Because I think most leaders have, do you have the concept ADD, attention deficit disorder? I think leaders have, I call leaders like kindergartners. They have no patience. They have no ability to focus and stay with something for any period of time. And they're just like shiny objects. Oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. And they have the power in the organization to get whatever they want. This is why you guys all, I'm talking about them. Maybe some of you are them. We are us. It's a human trait. Power corrupts, right? That whole construct. Okay. Most organizations I go into, Agile becomes the goal. I don't think this is a very good goal. Agile's a competency. I look at Agile like fitness and health. Agile means that, when I say I'm fit or I'm healthy, there's never an end state. You're never done. It means you've got a lifestyle of fitness and health. Now, why am I fit? Why am I healthy? Because I have something else I want to do in life. I want to see my kids grow up. I want to enjoy a mountain hike. Whatever that is, I have a goal in mind. Businesses are the same thing. When Agile becomes our goal, it becomes a little bit superficial. We often tell leaders, find a goal that's more valuable, that's going to change your business. Agility is the competency that's going to get us there. For Amerisure, it was about an innovative culture. We need to innovate. We need to hit new technology markets or we're going to be obsolete. So, in a sense, Amerisure already knew a lot of their strengths and challenges. What we do is we kind of help visualize that for them. So we use something called the Competing Values Framework. This is just a very simple way to view culture in an organization. It's kind of like personality of a person. Culture, because it's a human system, it takes on like personality of company. So we have values around collaboration. Let's do things together. We're a family. We're connected. Everybody has a voice. We have a value system of creativity, innovation, taking risks, trying new things. But we got to do them quickly. We got to compete. We got to move. We got to hit that market. And if we don't do that with quality, if we don't do that with scale, right, we're not going to be able to address the market for tomorrow. These are 4 dimensions every organization needs, and any weakness will show up in their performance and their health. So we help focus leaders not on agility, but on health. And we use agility to help shape it. So for Amerisure, this is what it looked like. A very simple picture that basically said, hey, we have a gap, a principal gap between control and create. What is that showing? That's showing them 2 things. Something they already knew. Of course, we need innovation. We know that. But the second thing it showed them is the relationship. In order to get that, we have to give something up. What are we willing to give up? This is really hard for financial institutions, insurance, transportation, health, right? Because why? Their number one value is safety, reliability. They are unable, they said, we cannot get rid of control because we're going to lose control and then we're not going to be safe and reliable, and that's not true. There's some trade-offs here. They started to see those trade-offs. So when we start to think about this, we start to say, can I transform this? Can I delegate this? We could try, but this is inherent to who we are. You bring in a consulting firm, they can put in what we call processes, but they're not going to change the underlying DNA of the organization. Only leaders do that because organizations mirror their leadership. So if we want this shift, we've got to get leaders to own it. And so this gave Amerisher leaders the ability to see my role, my responsibility, my focus of what needs to be done. Now, their first year, they claimed success. What did that mean? That mean they developed an internal process of innovation. It was there. Basically, they got recognized for a digital innovation practice. And they submitted it to the industry and were like, hey, good job. You get a participation award, right? I make fun of it, but they felt good about it, right? It was a step. It was a step. And it confirmed their focus of innovation, and a lot was going on behind the scenes. So, commitment. We've got the courage to take a step. That was the hardest step. We've got the openness to try something new. That was the hardest step. Then we've got focus. That was the hardest step. Commitment's hard too. Why commitment's hard? Commitment's like a long-term focus. If you think about it, I'm committed. Commitment means that we've got to recommit, and we've got to stick with something. So again, I find this the hardest step. I'm sorry, making it hard. Business transformations don't happen in a year. Amerisher did not think they're transformed in a year. The people did not think they're transformed in this year, right? Nobody believed their transformation occurred, right? There wasn't some magical moment where like, oh, we're agile, right? This is something actually quite surprising, but a lot of leaders I work with, they ask me, Pete, when are we going to land this plane? I'm like, what do you mean? We're doing this agile plane. We need to land it. I'm like, it doesn't land. It's just going to take off again. Like, this is a journey. This is an investment. Like, if you're not reinvesting year over year over year, it's like fitness. Okay, so you're fit, you're going to stop exercising? You're healthy, you're going to stop eating salads now? I can go back to McDonald's because I'm healthy? No. But yet leaders want to land the plane. They want to say, we're done with this. I'm like, okay, good luck with that. The Business Agility did a report. They did studies. It takes 2 years for the first stepwise of business agility. This is a little bit sad. This is a reality check for leaders that says your first step is going to take a while. Now, to be honest, if an organization is not seeing some positive impact in the first year they do something, they're doing it wrong. Not to say it's a visible external step, but if you're not seeing visible internal steps, get a new leader or coach or advisor. But also recognize that magic and miracles don't happen in 2 years. Transformation only occurs year after year investment. Think of your financial portfolio. If any of you do any financial investing, now unless you're in cryptocurrency or some kind of startup game, likely you do not see double returns in a year. What do we see? We see returns happening when you invest and reinvest your dividends year over year over year. They say you can double your income with average 7% returns. Now, whoever gets average 7% returns anymore, I don't know. But the same thing occurs with agile transformation, any kind of transformation, business transformation. When we reinvest year over year over years, that's when we start to see the transformation. Only because you're focusing on something over and over and over and you're starting to improve it. This could be a fitness goal. This could be a health goal or a business transformation goal. Now, at Amerishare, we were checking this every year. We were looking at the results of their surveys, and you notice like subtle changes going on in this control dimension. This was really kind of fascinating. At one level, you say, there's not change. Well, you realize what's happened here. COVID happened here. Okay, so something else was going on. But also notice the perception changes, the dotted line. What's really fascinating about culture that I found, 2 ways culture changes. Culture actually changes, and people's view of culture and what it should be changes. So there's 2 pieces of information that are shifting. What we believe is actually there and what we believe it actually should be. So what's really fascinating, when the culture is pulled apart and says, we feel a lot of discontent, people feel more like, this really sucks. But when you actually start to make movement, then all of a sudden this side starts to come back like, this is a little bit better. Maybe control's okay. So you're seeing both the change and the perception of change shifting at the same time, reducing a gap. And again, this doesn't mean perfect. What this means is more aligned. It's a healthier system because we're more in tune with what's going on. At the same time, the innovation side was tweaking. Now, on this side, the desire did not change, but their perception of reality is. And they say in this framework, every 5 points is a significant factor. It means a 5% change in perception, and here we're seeing about that 5 points each year going on. So what they're doing is they're reinvesting their returns year after year is where you start to see the growth, where you start to see the change. And so not only did they get internal change, but they got their industry recognition. And so this is then the 4-year chart of where they started to see recognition and change in their industry. Some of those are for their internal processes, but then you start to see that internal start to turn to the external and say, okay, we're starting to build the AI intelligent predictive platform, and then they're actually starting to use that platform for underwriting, for doing insurance type policies. All right, we had courage, openness, focus, commitment, and now respect. I'd like to say respect is the hardest. To be honest, respect is the easiest. But we don't do it, do we? Respect is an interesting one. How do you teach respect? I mean, you have to go back to kindergarten, don't you? And I did say leaders are like kindergartners in one way, right? They have attention deficit syndrome. But a lot of leaders aren't like kindergartners, a lot of ways of the respect side. I don't think it's maniacally bad, though. I think, again, it's just a lack of awareness. It was interesting. We did another one of these studies with a group in Northern Ireland. And we asked them about their collaboration and kind of competitive edge. And that's the other spectrum I'm not showing here. I'm showing the control create. And what was interesting is leaders said, hey, we're perfectly collaborative and we're perfectly competitive. And what competitive means is we're perfectly like that intensity, go fast, get it done. The employees, on the other hand, said, hold on, this is way out of whack. We are not collaborating at all. All we hear is just go, 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 get it done. You're already late. And we asked the leaders, why is this? Why is there a difference in opinion? Is it true that both exist, or is it just a misunderstanding? And we did some diagnosis of this, and in fact, it was true. The leaders did collaborate. The leaders went to offsites. The leaders got together. The leaders got to travel. The leaders got to engage. They would work on the strategy together. And once the strategy was developed, we build a PowerPoint slide or deck. We hand it off to everybody else and says, go, 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 you're already late, get it done. So both were true. And this is what I see with a lot of respect. That feels very disrespectful. Leaders, you collaborate, we don't. And it's not because leaders don't want you to, but it's realizing leaders don't realize what you're experiencing. So it's our job just to help them understand what this is. And for them, then respect can come. Now, I'm going to cut my talk down. Won't go too much into respect, but I do want to share a little bit about the moral of the story. The moral of the story is not that you have to have a senior leadership team to drive an organizational transformation. That is not the moral of my story. Now, when you do get a senior leadership team to take these steps of courage, openness, focus, commitment, respect, it's incredibly powerful. Not perfect, it's powerful. But going back to my very first story that we started with, any team can do this. So the moral of my story is that any team, leadership or not, I was not a leader when I drove transformation into our organization 30 years ago. But any leadership team, any team, we use the term leadership, the ship side, the act of leading. Every person in the organization has an act of leading. Yes, leaders, senior leaders cast what we call bigger shadows, right? They influence more of the organization. But it's the lower level leaders, it's the everyday leaders, it's the scrum masters, product owners, architects, right? The people that are on the ground, they're leading every day. And when you put the leadership team together, they can shape a better future. This story was told in a couple of different ways. I spoke, this is the CIO of Amerisher, Amjad Al-Zubi. He and I spoke at the Business Agility Conference in New York City. He also came onto our podcast to share a little bit more personal side of the story, like how he changed as a leader through this process as well. And again, I don't want to set up Amerisher as a perfect story, not a success case study. They're still on the journey. They're still in the realm of this. But for them, it was quite powerful change. So the question for you is, are you ready to take a step? Are you ready to take a step of courage, step of openness, right? A step towards a more agile leadership journey. We are here, I say we, Jenna, my work and life partner, is here with me as well. We are outside to learn a little bit more about what we do. If you want to learn a little bit more, we do gather and license guides who teach and coach our curriculum. What we do essentially is we offer classes, again, more about inspiration than education, while we do teach and educate leaders. But more than that, what we do is we focus on leadership development in longer-term programs. These are like 3-month curriculums, cohort programs, and some 360 coaching. And what we do is we break down our compass into 2 halves. And so we focus on a leadership half, where it's the individual leader side, about how I show up, my mindset, and my behaviors as a leader. And then the organizational side. And I showed you just a little bit about both of those paths here today, showing a little bit about that personal side as well as the bigger side. So, question for you. Do you have the courage, the openness, the focus, the commitment, the respect to change you and or your organization? So, I want to say thank you. See, it looks like I'm even ahead of schedule. Look at that. Since I'm ahead of schedule, any questions? I'd love to just take a couple of questions. And I will be here for 2 days as well, if there's questions also in between. But is there any public questions everybody's willing to ask? I see a hand back here.
I wanted to ask, how did you measure the cultural shift?
Yeah, how did I measure the cultural shift? So, I mentioned the grid structure, right? It's called the Competing Values Framework. This is something that's been around for about 30 years, developed out of the University of Michigan. And when we think about culture, I want you to think about layers, right? You have everything from mindset at the bottom to kind of artifacts at the top. Well, right in the center is values. So what this culture survey does essentially is it teases out what we think is valuable. It's like the Agile manifesto. It says we value individuals' interactions over process and tools. Okay, you could actually survey. You could actually ask your company, do we really? Like if I put these two on a scale, how would they balance? We do the same thing with this culture grid. We say, okay, there's questions that drive about how fast do we go? How much urgency do we have versus how collaborative and connected are we? And we ask questions and we make people like weigh between those. And then we have like create. So when you're asked these questions, you are asked to weigh them and compare them. We've developed our own internal survey process at the Agile Leadership Journey that we can use and some of our guides use as part of their curriculum. But yes, it's all built on that model that's been studied for about 30 years. The same is true with the leadership side. When we talk about experts, achievers, and catalysts, this is again another philosophy that's been, or a study that's been done for about 30 years. How do leaders develop? We can measure that as well. Thank you for that question. One more question.
Hey, I'm with Pfizer, one of the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Question from me would be, would you rather change part of the organization or kickstart them into the journey and basically make them successful? Or would you attempt to try to change the entire organization?
Yeah. So the question is, do part or do all? I'll say whatever you have access to, because it will never happen if you wait to do all. It's very rare you get a Satya Nadella type leader that drives an organizational transformation like at Microsoft, especially the larger company. Pfizer likely never happen. Why? Because leaders at the top naturally become more conservative. It's just more risky. So usually when we go into an organization, we come somewhere in the middle, somewhere in a division, in a department, in a structure. Now, the danger is coming in IT, because then Agile is just an IT thing. So usually when we're working with an organization, we work with the intersection of IT and business, right? Getting other parts of the business working together. So that's where I would really caution you to take part. Careful that it's an IT only thing, because then Agile's IT, and we know it's not. For true business agility, you need governance happens all over the organization. So I would start with part, yes. Yeah. Can I take one more question? We doing okay? Okay, any other hands? Yes, back there. And I'll get you.
Great presentation. I have one question. I saw a slide about survey that the transformation is going to show like 2 years time business results.
Yes.
And my question is, when you tell this to an executive, they're going to see first business impact results in 2 year time minimum or average. How do they react to that?
Yeah. Yeah, how do business leaders react to the patience it takes? You know, I think it's a good telling point. If the leaders aren't patient enough to recognize that, they're probably not going to be successful with whatever you do. I would probably look for something different. I think most business leaders understand and respect that. I mean, we recognize culture change is not a simple thing. I think the problem with culture is most leaders roll their eyes at culture. Oh yeah, culture. I think one of the things we do really well is we make culture accessible to leaders. I hear a lot of comments like, Pete, I've heard Agile blah, 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 blah for about 5 years. I finally understand why I should care. That to me is like the aha. Like, why should a business leader, why should somebody in claims or underwriting or legal or finance, why should they care about Agile? I think that's where I think we in the tech community, and I'm saying we because I think most of you are probably in that tech community, we speak too much tech language that we turn off a lot of business leaders. I think we got to start to speak that leader language. A message like 2 years isn't as challenging. When it's a message around safe, Scrum, Kanban, sprints, then they get turned off. But if you talk risk, policy, mindset, how these things are impacting their business from an innovation perspective, they listen. So I think some of it is our job in communicating properly to business leaders. And that's something that we try to do. We don't try to specialize in the tech side of Agile. We try to specialize in that leadership side. So again, I just want to say thank you. Appreciate your patience and listening. And thank you for being here. So just appreciate that.